Hello, welcome back. We are on our last lesson for the week. We are going to be looking at two-step equations. So that is this one over here. We did one step, just the last lesson. So the only thing different with this one is, just like the title says, we have one extra step. Basically, it's a two-step one. So as we open this up, this should all be review for you guys. There will be, I think, a little bit of fraction work on here too. In this case, the one you see here, there is a coefficient. And so the difference here with this type of work than the last one is we will always have a coefficient and a constant. Pay attention to the sign. I know that's a subtraction sign, but it's also a negative. It means the same thing. So I have a coefficient, a constant, and then our answer over here. So when we are working these problems out, and I'm going to rewrite this over here, 7n minus 4 equals 31. When you guys have two-step equations, okay, first thing you need to be thinking of right away, and a lot of you guys were doing this, draw a line on the equal sign, is you need to, whatever I do on this side of the equation, I must do over here. Okay, we always have to balance our equations out. You always start on the variable side, okay? So even if this was over on this side and 31 was over here, in a situation like that, you still start on the variable side, okay? Don't just get in, they set it up nicely for you guys here, where they put the variable first, and then the constant, and then the answer. I prefer you guys, even if it's not written that way, I would rewrite it out so it is that way, because this is probably the most familiar way of seeing these equations, and you'll have a better success rate of solving these. And all you have to do is just move the numbers around. That's it. But in this case, we can get started right away. When we see a two-step equation like this, always start with the constant, okay? That is the number that is not attached to the variable. And in this case, it's a 4. But it's not just a 4, it is a negative 4. That sign is very important. You need to pay attention to it, because I need to move this 4. And if I'm going to move it correctly, I need to do the opposite of this sign, okay? So under here, to get rid of this 4, I need to cancel it out and make it a 0. Well, negative 4, and what could I use to make it a 0? I could use a positive 4. So all you're doing is the opposite sign, all right? And that same number. So negative 4, then a positive 4. And like I said, you have to balance this equation out. Whatever I do on the left side, I have to do the exact same over here. So we're going to add 4 here. So I'll cross these out now. These are canceled. 31 plus 4, that's going to be 35. Bring the 7n down, okay? I would highly suggest you guys are doing this on a separate piece of paper. I would, if I could show you guys on a separate piece of paper, if there was a better way of me showing you, I would be doing it on a separate piece of paper, not on this computer screen. It's more time consuming on the screen. Just get out a separate piece of paper. You will save yourself time to do it that way and showing your work. Now I go ahead and I'm now, if you look at this, I did one step here. This was a two-step equation. I got rid of one step. So now I'm down to what we did yesterday, or whenever you guys did this. It would have been a one-step equation. I have a coefficient right here. Here's my coefficient. That's 7, the number next to the variable, and my answer is 35. So 7 times a number is 35. You can divide this by 7. Always divide our coefficients. And divide by 7. So we cross that out. N equals 35 divided by 7 is 5. All right, put 5 in here, and there's our two-step equation. So let's do another one. In this one here, I'm glad we got to go over this one. This one, okay, do not get confused with it. You just have to do one property first. There's something called the distributive property. Anytime I see parentheses and a number outside of it, You guys should be thinking right away, I need to do distributive property. I need to have that number outside of the parentheses, and I need to distribute it. That means I need to pass it to both of these things inside the parentheses. And we do that through multiplication. So I get 2 parentheses t plus 1 equals 10. All right, so I'm going to distribute this 2. The number outside the parentheses needs to be distributed to both numbers inside the parentheses, okay? So that's me doing t2 times t. Well, anytime I take a number times the variable, it's just going to be those 2 combined. So I'll have 2. I'm going to do a capital T. It's going to be easier to see that compared to the lowercase one. 2t plus, and don't forget, this number outside the parentheses needs to be multiplied with that number inside. So 2 times 1 is 2. 2t plus 2. Oftentimes I would see you guys multiply the first number, the first term, and then you just add 1. No, make sure this gets multiplied with both terms inside the parentheses. Bring this down, equals 10. All right, 2t plus 2 equals 10. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I can draw my line. I can start working on these problems just like normal. Again, get rid of the constant first. We worry about our variable last. Got to get rid of this constant. And you see I have a plus 2. So to get rid of this plus 2, we're going to do the opposite of the plus sign, minus 2. Minus 2. Anything I do on the left side, I must do on the right side. So now, cross these out. 10 minus 2 is 8. Bring this down, 2t equals 8. Go ahead. Again, I could cross my line through here. Anything I do on the left side, I must do on the right. I have to move my coefficient, the number next to the variable. The only way we're going to do that is by dividing. So divide by 2. Divide by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I can say t equals 4. All right. So backtrack here. Let's go over that one more time. You guys see right away, okay, I got parentheses with 2 things inside of the parentheses, 2 terms here. I need to take that number outside the parentheses and distribute it to both of them. 2 times t is 2t. 2 times 1 is 2. All right, equals 10. Once I have that laid out, I can do my 2 steps. You always focus on the constant first, which is right here. You can do that through addition or subtraction. You just have to choose the opposite sign that you see next to it. So the opposite sign of a positive sign is a negative sign. Minus 2, minus 2. Bring everything down. Now I have the coefficient. Divide by 2, divide by 2. There's our answer. Next one, another practice with distributive property. So 9 p minus 4 equals negative 18. All right, to do this one, again, before we start doing any of this stuff, there is one thing you could do that maybe would make it easier instead of doing distributive property. If it works out for you guys, if it this is another option you can do, and I'll show you this option. Instead of working it all out where you're multiplying the 9 on both terms, you could, here's a little quick and easy trick, you could actually divide both sides by the outside number. So to start off with something like this, I could divide this by 9 and divide this by 9. This whole term gets divided by 9. What that allows me to do is I can cross these 9s out. And then I would do negative 18 divided by 9. You should remember, if I have a negative divided by a positive, your answer is always going to be a negative. So that sign does matter. It needs to be a negative 2. And then I can bring this down. P minus 4 equals negative 2. Now, if you look at this, you see I have nothing by my variable. I do not have a coefficient. It's understood as a 1. So all I have to do is just do a one-step problem, and that's going to be that changing that negative 4 to a positive 4. Positive 4. Anything I do on the left side, I must do the same thing on the right. I can cross these out, bring the P down. So now I have P equals negative 2 plus 4. Think of it like this, 4 minus 2. The bigger number is the positive. So these signs are not the same. You have a negative and a positive. I'm going to subtract it. So 4 minus 2 is 2. Biggest number gives it sign. The biggest number is the 4, so it's going to be a positive 2. My answer is 2. All right, one more here. So in this case here, I have a coefficient, a constant, and the answer all set up for me. Again, I told you guys yesterday or the previous lesson, when you see your coefficient set up like this, I like to write that. I like to write this as a fraction, and there's nothing next to the h. So what we can do is just say 1/6 h. Okay. If you see something like this, you always can just rewrite it with the 1 as the numerator. Then I can put my variable over here. It's just a little bit easier to see. Subtract by 1, and then equals negative 3. All right, get started with my setup here. This is a two-step one, so I always will start with the constant first. That's this guy right here, the number that is not with the variable. I need to move that guy. And the way I'm going to do that is by doing the opposite of that sign. So instead of a negative 1 or a minus 1, the opposite of that is a plus 1. So I'll just do plus 1. That means I need to do plus 1 over here. Anything I do on the left side of the equation, on the left side of the equal sign, I must do the same thing on the right side. Cross these out. Negative 3 plus 1. Different signs. That means I subtract. Biggest number gives it sign. And I have negative 2. Bring this down. 1/6 h equals negative 2. All right. Now I have a fraction. So far, when we've had, in this lesson, when we've had a coefficient, and it's a whole number next to the variable, you always divide. Here I have a fraction next to the variable. We still are technically dividing, but it's actually going to become, because of keep, change, flip with fractions, you're going to flip the fraction and you're going to change it to multiplication. So I'm going to take the inverse of this, the reciprocal of this, and I'm going to go, instead of saying 1/6, I'll say 6 over 1, and I multiply. Again, this is a fraction, that's why I'm doing it this way. Technically, we're still dividing this fraction, even though we're multiplying at the end, but the only way we can divide a fraction is by flipping it and multiplying it, okay? So, if that makes sense. So what I would do over here, I'm going to multiply by the fraction, by that 6 over 1 now. So negative 2 times 6. I can now cross these out. And I can bring this down. H is now by itself. H equals, and I have negative 2. This is not decimal, this is times. Okay, negative 2 times 6, which is negative 12. A negative times a positive is always a negative. So, negative 12, we'll go over here. We'll say negative 12. And that's all we have to do. This one will take some time. You must show your work on a separate piece of paper if you want to be able to do this successfully the first time around. But just remember, and I'm going to have notes on this as well, just to refresh you guys on this. Always move the constant first. Always move the number that's not attached to the variable. That needs to get moved first through addition or subtraction, and then divide your coefficient. All right. Please let me know again. If you have any questions, email me, text me, or call me, and we will set something up this week, next week, until the end of the quarter to get this done. Thanks again for your time.